In 1985, on an ominous New Year's Day, a jet called Flight 980 crashed into a 112-foot mountain in Bolivia. It boarded a total of 29 people. What makes this case so astounding is that none of the remains of the plane nor the passengers were found for 30 years. The plane itself was driven by very experienced pilots and engineers, and it was supposed to land at an airport called La Paz, which is the highest airport in the world. Due to its high altitude, the air is very thin, and pilots collectively find it very difficult to land, which is why they have a runway that is 2 times larger than the regular length. The last time anyone heard about Flight 980 was at 8:38 p.m. Eastern Time. Ground controllers reported that the jet was 30 miles away from the airport and 20,000 miles above the ground. It was about to descend when it crashed into Mount Illimani, which towers over the airport. When the plane crashed nose first, it cartwheeled forward and sprawled across the mountain. Witnesses reported that the entire valley started to shake. Meanwhile, the radio inside the airport only heard a tiny click. It took an entire day to find the plane wreckage, which was located at the peak of the mountain. An avalanche blocked the rescue teams from moving forward. The U.S. Embassy, along with 2 other organizations responsible for investigating plane crashes, were allowed entry. Because they couldn't access the peak of the mountain, they had asked to borrow a high-altitude Peruvian helicopter. Once they were given access to the helicopter, it took several attempts for mechanics to fix it before usage. Once the helicopter started working, the weather again prevented the team from reaching the top of the mountains. Strangely, it was said that one Bolivian climber by the name of Bernardo Guarachi actually climbed all the way to the peak 2 days after the crash. When he came back, his findings were not disclosed by the Bolivian government. As a matter of fact, even his name wasn't disclosed in the official report. In March 1985, a private investigation team of engineers managed to make it to the top, only to have seen luggage, some wreckage, but no flight recorders or people. In the last 30 years, only 5 other private teams made it to the crash site, but were not successful in finding any remains. None of the organizations could come up with an established reason for what caused the plane crash. They ruled out hijackers, engine malfunctions, and even birds. The only conclusion that they came up with is that the plane was destroyed because they crashed into a mountain. Due to the lack of explanation, people began to come up with their own theories. Some say that the crew was new and they just happened to be flying in bad weather. Others insisted that the jet was running drugs, whilst others even claimed that because Bolivia's richest man was on board, the Paraguayan mafia blew it up. A former pilot even suggested that a bomb went off, which caused the plane to depressurize for his explanation of the absence of bodies and blood. As decades progressed, the site became even more hidden beneath the layers of glaciers, making it even more difficult for the vanishing jet to be found. After 30 years the plane crashed, 2 men by the name of Dan Futrell and Isaac Stoner wanted to take on the challenge to find the missing plane for no reason other than to go on an adventure. The 2 first did their research, with Dan looking up the facts and history associated with the plane, and Isaac looking up survival skills, altitude, and weather. They visited the mountain during a warmer month, where the glaciers had melted a bit, giving them the benefit of finding any debris. When they embarked on their journey, they came across some plane parts. Upon closer inspection, they discovered a mummified-looking body, well preserved because the muscles, fat, and skin were still intact. Even further up the mountain, they discovered diaries, children's clothing, and strangely, lizard skins. Finally, they found the plane's black box that had all the recordings of what happened that day. The 2 men were excited once they got a hold of this valuable evidence, but quickly realized that it was illegal for them to keep it. According to Annex 13 of the Convention of International Civil Aviation, only the country in which the plane crashed is allowed to examine the black box. Because Bolivia and the United States had a shaky relationship, getting answers was almost impossible. Emails and phone calls were left unanswered, and the case remained cold and open. The Bolivian man Bernardo, whose report wasn't disclosed by the government, had let people know that when he woke up the next morning in his campsite that day, he saw footprints in the snow that were not his. He recalled that the footprints seemed to keep a distance from his campsite, as if someone was monitoring him. When he arrived back from the mountain, he was immediately detained by the government and interrogated about what he saw, where one man even threatened him, saying, quote, "Careful telling anyone about this. I will ruin you." End quote. What really happened to Flight 980? Can the crash just be blamed on the terrible weather conditions? Or was there something much more sinister at play? Given the lack of answers and assistance from the government officials, why was Bernardo silenced, and why weren't the black box recordings released? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting content.